Hey folks, you want to hear a really smart take? Both sides are the same! I have no critical thinking skills.
Hellfire is upon us once again. Throughout the constant terrifying roller coaster that is the year of our Lord 2020, one thing has remained consistent. America's favorite national pastime? Political campaigns. This year, President Trump fights for re-election against the Democrats' best hair-sniffing, ice-cream-loving, corn-pop-slaying septuagenarian around, Joe Biden. Unfortunately for Trump, most Americans don't like being dead.
The president's disastrous mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic has crippled his already shaky standing with most of the public. Trump has been historically unpopular for his entire presidency, mainly because of who he is and what he does, but he's been propped up by a good economy and the lack of any major crises or disasters. Now, stormtroopers are invading American cities, coronavirus cases are exploding, Americans are dying by the thousand, and millions are unemployed. Convincing re-election pitch that does not make.
Nevertheless, Trump is trying his damnedest to gaslight the virus away, and the media has been desperate to turn this election into a horse race so Trump isn't completely down and out. I narrowed the path to 270 electoral votes down to 10 battleground states. These 10 states will be critical in deciding who occupies the White House in January, and whether or not I will look like a giant idiot after November 3rd. We're starting off strong and in alphabetical order with everyone's favorite desert hellscape, Arizona. Arizona hasn't voted for a Democrat for president since the 90s, but it's looking increasingly likely that it'll break that streak this year. Republicans' grip on the state has been slipping away thanks to a rapid shift towards the Democrats in the suburbs. The Democrats won the Senate race there back in 2018, and Biden has held a small but consistent lead. Also, it's been one of the hardest hit states by the coronavirus pandemic, so I can't imagine the state's high population of senior retirees are going to be too enthralled with Trump when they go to vote in November.
Speaking of Sunbelt hellholes full of old retirees and ravaged by coronavirus, where would we be without you, Florida? Probably somewhere better.
This swamp-ridden meth lab of a state in recent elections has been stubbornly Republican by the slimmest of margins, so Trump really needs this state if he wants to get re-elected. Yeah, he's losing. Who knew that failing to control a plague that kills seniors would piss off the seniors? For fuck's sake, this place let Disney World reopen. Florida is the world's, yes, world's coronavirus epicenter. Can't imagine the Floridians are too pleased about that. Georgia is another member of the Red States Turning Blue thanks to political shifts in the growing suburbs club. Much like Arizona, Georgia hasn't sent a Democrat to the White House since the days of President BJ, but polling this year has shown a pretty tight race with Biden leading in actual credible polls and Trump leading in polls from notoriously trash-tier pollsters. I'm not making that up. Look, Georgia can still go either way, but gun to my head, Biden wins it.
Iowa, nice place. I've been there before. It's terrible. Although it once was a noble Midwestern swing state, Iowa has shifted Republican really quickly over the past few years. Seriously, Trump won it by more than Texas, but we'll get to that later. Polling in Iowa has been pretty close this time around, but a Democrat was supposed to get elected governor there in 2018, so I'm not holding my breath.
Ah, Michigan, land of automobiles and Great Lakes. Trump won a surprise victory in Michigan by the skin of his teeth in 2016, but that win is looking like a giant fluke right about now. Democrats won big in Michigan in 2018, and Biden is destroying in the polls. There's nothing to see here. North Carolina is just one big case of blue balls. They voted for a Democrat in 1976 and 2008, and that's it. North Carolina has been a maddeningly close state for a while now, but based on state polling and the fact that he's winning nationwide by a huge margin, I think Biden will end up taking it in the end. Ohio, one of the worst states in the Union. It gave us the Paul brothers, but it also gave us Scott the Woz, so it gets a pass for now. Much like Iowa, Ohio was once a proud swing state, in fact, the swing state for decades, but in 2016 it swung hard to the right and hasn't looked back since. Trump won Ohio by a pretty substantial margin 4 years ago, and honestly, I'm just not willing to bet my dignity on Ohio doing the right thing. Ohio? Pennsylvania is a lot like Michigan in the sense that Trump won a surprise victory there in 2016, but Democrats kicked ass in 2018 and Biden has a giant polling lead. It's pretty clear which way the wind is blowing here.
Texas, yeehaw!
Blue Texas is the wet dream of Democrats everywhere. Remember what I said about Texas being closer than Iowa in 2016? Yeah. Much like Arizona and Georgia, Texas is shifting towards the Democrats very quickly thanks to the political shifts of its diverse and growing suburbs. After historic successes in 2018, it's looking increasingly likely that Texas might send a Democrat to the White House for the first time since the 1970s. And if Biden wins Texas, it's game over. Watch what happens if you take the 2016 election and just flip Texas. Yeah. Though in all likelihood, Biden's only winning Texas if he's already winning the election without it, so blue Texas would only be window dressing, but hey, it would make me nut pretty damn hard. Polling has shown a seriously close race, but I think in the end Trump will hold on to it very narrowly.
Wisconsin, best state in the Union, land of cheese and alcoholism. Wisconsin is the third of the Rust Belt trifecta that Trump won upset victories in 2016. Democrats did pretty well here in 2018, but their successes weren't nearly as big as in Michigan or Pennsylvania. Wisconsin has emerged as a true swing state, and yeah, Biden has a huge lead. Do you see the problem here?
Yeah, despite everything that's happened this year, the presidential contest just isn't that interesting. Biden is far and away the front-runner and has been for a while. Trump just isn't getting re-elected. The real competition is in the fight for control of Congress in down-ballot elections.
Starting with the House of Representatives, yeah, Democrats have a huge lead here too. I'm not getting into individual House races here, but all across the board, Democrats have had a huge advantage in fundraising, candidate recruitment, and the nationwide generic ballot. The Senate, though, is a bit more dicey.
The battle for Senate control is anyone's game at this point, with 11 competitive races that'll decide control of the upper chamber in January. Starting with Alabama, yeah. Incumbent Democrat Doug Jones was elected by the slimmest of margins in a 2017 special election because his Republican opponent was a literal fucking pedophile. This time around he faced his former football coach and noted non-pedophile Tommy Tuberville. Doug Jones is a cool guy, sent some Klansmen to jail, but Alabama is a super red state and Jones is almost certainly a goner come election day. Arizona Senator Martha McSally ran for Senate back in 2018, lost, and was then appointed to fill the vacant seat of late Senator John McCain. Now she's running to hold on to her seat in a special election for the rest of the seat's term. And she's getting destroyed by the Democratic candidate, former astronaut and Navy Captain Mark Kelly. Kelly is doing incredibly well in fundraising and polling, and while the race isn't completely a foregone conclusion, yeah, it's a foregone conclusion. Speaking of foregone conclusions, Colorado has shifted rapidly towards the Democrats over the past several years, and that's left Republican Senator Cory Gardner pretty much dead on arrival. The Democratic candidate is former Governor John Hickenlooper, who is the first in a long line of Senate candidates whose claim to fame is losing their last election. Hickenlooper previously ran for president, but after polling somewhere way below sea level, he decided to go for something a bit more attainable. In all likelihood, he's gonna win big and be the next senator from Weedland. Georgia is an interesting case with 2 Senate races this time around. In one of them, Republican David Perdue is running for re-election against another upwards failing Democrat, Jon Ossoff. Ossoff is famous for losing a special election for a House seat back in 2017, but you know, he might just pull it off this time around. Polling has shown a pretty close race, and I think whichever party wins the presidential race here is also going to win the Senate race, so slight advantage Ossoff here.
Georgia's other Senate race is a special election to fill the seat of former Senator Johnny Isakson, who resigned last year. In special elections in Georgia, all candidates from all parties go on one ballot for a primary in November. Whoever gets over 50% of the vote is the winner. If no one wins a majority, the top 2 candidates go to a runoff election in January. And since there are 1,000 candidates running, it's very likely that this election is going to be decided in January rather than November, where turnout is going to be really wacky, and who even knows who the 2 candidates are going to be, let alone who's going to win? Come on, it's not rocket science.
There are 5 major candidates for the November primary. Republican Kelly Loeffler, who was appointed to fill the seat in the interim and is now running for a full term. Congressman Doug Collins, another Republican who's pretty salty that Loeffler got appointed instead of him. Matt Lieberman, a Democrat whose sole claim to fame is being the son of another senator. Ed Tarver, a Democrat who previously served in the state legislature and as a U.S. attorney. And Reverend, as well as possible Ninja Turtle, Raphael Warnock, who seems like the Democratic Party favorite.
Polling for this race is really fucked up, and predicting it is above my pay grade, so see you in January.
Iowa, just as mediocre of a state as it was a few minutes ago. Pretty much everything I already said about it still applies here. In this Senate race, Republican Senator Joni Ernst faces off against Democrat Teresa Greenfield, who is most notable for losing a House race back in 2018. If Biden ends up winning Iowa, Greenfield might win, but advantage Ernst for now.
Now Kansas, that's what I call a worthless state. Kansas hasn't sent a Democrat to the Senate since Roosevelt was elected, but this time might be different. Democrats won the governor's race back in 2018, and polling has indicated a surprisingly tight race, depending on how crazy the Republican nominee is.
The Republican primary in August has Congressman Roger Marshall facing off against the man who is so insane that he cost Republicans a governor's race in a deep red state, Chris Kobach. The winner will face Democrat Barbara Bollier, a state lawmaker and former Republican, because hey, you take what you can get. If Marshall wins the primary, the seat will probably stay in Republican hands, but if Kobach wins, well, things are going to get interesting.
Maine, land of lobster, Stephen King, and a spineless Republican senator who always pretends to be moderate while voting with her party 99% of the time. Senator Susan Collins has historically won by big margins in this blue state due to her reputation as a wholesome, sensible moderate. Unfortunately for her, a lot of that goodwill has evaporated in the Trump era, and she's now in the fight of her life against Democrat Sarah Gideon. Ultimately, polarization will probably win the day, and for a Republican running in a blue state, I think it's bye-bye for Collins.
Montana is a predominantly red state, but it has a history of electing Democrats to the Senate and governorship. And in the uphill battle against incumbent Republican Steve Daines, Democrats got one of their best recruits of the election cycle, Governor Steve Bullock. Bullock, like John Hickenlooper of Colorado, ran for president before dropping down to a more modest pursuit. This race is going to be close, but I think Daines pulls away in the end thanks to the magic of polarization. North Carolina, we meet again. Republican Senator Tom Tillis, yes, his name is actually spelled like that, he's a freak of nature, is running for re-election against another upwards failing Democrat, Cal Cunningham. Cunningham served in the state legislature in the early 2000s, lost a Senate race in 2010, and are you sensing a pattern here? Like I said, Biden will probably end up taking North Carolina in the end, and with Cunningham actually outrunning Biden in a lot of polling, I think Cunningham has the advantage here. And Texas. Much of what I said about Texas earlier still applies here. Republican Senator John Cornyn is running for a fourth term against another failed House candidate, MJ Hager. Me personally, I don't trust anyone who uses initials as a name, but I don't want to inject politics into this. As I've said, although Texas is shifting towards the Democrats rapidly, I don't think it's quite there yet. Trump will probably end up taking Texas, and I don't see Hager winning without Biden carrying the state. Even if Biden does win Texas, she might still end up losing given that Cornyn has been outrunning Trump in most polls. It's probably not going to happen this time around. If I had to make a final call in the Senate, I'd say Democrats narrowly take control with 51 seats, and yeah, they probably pick up a few House seats too, why not? As for the presidency, I think I made my opinions pretty clear here. Any way you slice it, Biden has an enormous advantage that doesn't show any sign of going away. Public opinion about Trump has been pretty baked in long before the election season even began, and his standing with the public has only cratered further throughout the campaign. It's entirely a disaster of his own making. Trump has refused, and continues to refuse, to do anything about the coronavirus pandemic. Despite everything that's happened over the past 3.5 years, I thought he still had a prayer of winning a second term up until a few months ago. But his failure to do anything about the coronavirus crisis has sealed his fate.
I may be a hack, but I also know a thing or two about elections, and presidents tend not to get re-elected with 140,000 dead and millions unemployed on their watch. Trump has been losing to Biden by a wide margin since the very beginning of his presidency, and it's becoming more and more clear that his surprise win in 2016 wasn't because of a stroke of genius, it was a stroke of luck. I predict Biden's lead will probably shrink a little bit by November, but he'll still win pretty easily, probably winning the national popular vote by 6 or 7 points and around 351 electoral votes. Trump will be pissed, probably claim that the election is illegitimate, and Biden will take the oath of office on January 20th, 2021, along with his vice president,